Welcome to the movie Speeching. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take good care. Project Gemini is the name of the movie. Please like and subscribe to get every update. 3 years ago, the first case of a global plant virus was recorded, and it started to ravage most of our ecosystems. Eating food infected with the virus causes severe autoimmune diseases, and the loss of plant life has decreased the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere to 10%, which has increased the number of natural disasters all over the world. The world's leading research laboratories have been unsuccessful in developing a cure, and people are starting to think the planet is doomed. The only hope left is Project Gemini, developed by Dr. Stephen around 2 ancient alien artifacts discovered by paleontologists who are sure the objects are 4 billion years old, before there was any kind of life on Earth. Stephen's team has recreated the super tough materials that the sphere and the engine are made of and have made copies, and this engine has allowed them to build a ship that flew unmanned and found a suitable planet to terraform. The sphere is for creating life and works thanks to dozens of commands that the team has finally finished decoding. It's also proof that life on Earth was created by aliens. A team consisting of both doctors and military pilots will be traveling to create Earth 2.0 with the sphere in the solar system TESS, which is several hundred light years from here. Stephen has a wife called Amy, who doesn't want him to go on this mission. On the day of the launch, she still comes to the base to try to stop Stephen from leaving, but she doesn't make it on time and must watch how the ship leaves the planet. When the vessel leaves the atmosphere, an unusual crack appears on the alien sphere, indicating they may not be alone. Using the alien engine technology, the ship opens a warping portal that allows them to jump across the universe. However, as soon as they make it to the other side, the systems indicate an error. They haven't arrived at TESS, they're somewhere unknown. Stephen blames engineer Peter for this, claiming he made a mistake when he entered the coordinates, so he's relieved of his duties for now. Moments later, while Stephen rests, he keeps thinking about Amy, but also about the first time he activated the sphere, which allowed him to see some weird humanoid form that quickly disappeared. Afterward, Stephen asks the team to try to set the jump trajectory to figure out where they are, but it's impossible to do because all their data is messed up, as if they moved between the third and fourth dimensions. Meanwhile, Peter leaves his bunker and takes one of the security cameras so he can inspect the sphere alone. At that moment, the computer announces someone has opened the repair airlock and that there's an unidentified object approaching. To everyone's shock, they suddenly see a frozen Peter floating outside. Dr. David thinks Peter ended things because he couldn't live with his mistake, but Dr. Leona refuses to believe it because she's known Peter for 8 years and he wasn't that kind of guy. Stephen scolds her for crying over the guy that has doomed humanity and orders her to take over Peter's duties from now on. Later, David shares that when his daughter died, he also almost ended things, but he thought he could be useful instead. Now that the mission is over, he's feeling useless again, but Stephen promises him they'll find a solution. At that moment, the ship comes across a planet made of volcanic rock. It doesn't have oxygen, but the outside environment isn't aggressive, meaning they'd only need breathing masks. Stephen thinks this is the perfect alternative to continue their plan and eagerly lands, but Captain Ryan stops him, pointing out that they haven't examined the planet thoroughly, so Stephen recklessly risking the safety of the crew. However, Stephen doesn't care and reminds everyone that he's the one giving orders here. The team will land via shuttle while Officer Richard remains on the mothership. Just as the shuttle gets closer to the planet, they encounter a storm so fierce that they have to activate the brake thrusters to slow the fall. This will also consume all of their fuel and make it impossible for them to return, but it is their only chance to survive. When the shuttle hits the ground, the crew passes out and Stephen dreams about the time he gave Amy a bracelet made with a special part of an ancient orb, trying to connect the two things that matter most to him. Moments later, the crew woke up and immediately went back to work. The shuttle is not seriously damaged, but fuel levels are low and they are stuck here. Stephen didn't see a problem since they'd been coming to stay for 4 years, and even if they didn't land where they wanted, he was sure they could use one of the giant caves as a dome for the fruit. The bridge is launched. Meanwhile, in the hidden hallway of the shuttle, a strange substance is falling from the wall. In the mothership, Richard checks the other rooms and also finds the substance and the missing camera. Once everyone is fully equipped, the crew takes the orb to the nearest cave and successfully activates it. They then return to the shuttle to begin collecting data, but Ryan interrupts their work to announce that martial law is in effect on the station. To explain his decision, he shared some files that Richard sent him while the doctors were at work. It was a video Peter recorded of himself examining the sphere so he wouldn't be accused of making a mistake later. When he opened the engine door, he saw something moving in the darkness jump out and kill him before throwing him out of the ship. The camera was unable to capture the creature's appearance, but Richard explained that he had examined all the footage and that this alien had been with them since they left Earth because it moved around in the sphere as the Trojan horse. This probably caused a problem during the jump, but he was no longer on the mothership. He had gone down to the planet in the shuttle. Richard is able to follow him because the aliens are jamming the electromagnetic field, explaining the bad recording. The discussion is suddenly interrupted by David, who notices something strange on the system. The sphere is running a different program than the one they downloaded. Steven wants to return to the field, but Ryan stops him, reminding him that he will not allow him to lead anymore and accusing him of keeping secrets. Ryan reveals that Richard also found footage of Steven seeing this strange shape on Earth a few months ago, so he knew there was a potential threat, but he didn't tell anyone, meaning Peter's death was his fault. Outraged by this accusation, Steven stormed out of the room and thought about all the work he and David had put into this project. Steven is unsure if David should go with them because he is still grieving, but David convinces him that he is okay and wants to create a better Earth to prevent more children from dying like his daughter. Moments later, Steven meets David and asks him to sneak through the airlock with him to examine the orb. David doesn't want to disobey Ryan, but Steven changes his mind when he reminds him about his daughter and the future of the planet. As soon as they arrive at the cave, they notice that the sphere is creating alien life forms faster than it is creating life on Earth because someone has readjusted the settings. Steven immediately begins working on the sphere's settings, ignoring David's pleas to leave and chat with everyone. At that moment, David notices on their radar that the aliens are getting closer, so he fires a warning shot to try to get Steven to move. Steven responds by pulling out his own gun, but before things escalate, they notice the aliens have entered the cave. After Steven grabbed a piece of the orb to take with him, the two began to run away, noticing the creature getting closer due to its shadow and the noise it made. They finally get a full view of it as they leave the cave, but before the creature can attack them, they return to the shuttle and close the airlock. David calls Steven out for risking their lives, but Steven reminds him that the orb is more important and that next time he won't hesitate to shoot. Later, Ryan also appeared to scold Steven, and when Steven explained that they would have to use force to stop him, Ryan punched him. Suddenly, the computer sounds an alarm to notify the crew that the integrity of the module has been compromised. Leona leaves the room to investigate the problem and finds a lot of slime in the hallway, then is suddenly transported back to another area. Frank is the one who informs him that the aliens have blown a hole in the low deck and are now on the lander. Very carefully, the two men hid in the laboratory, where it became very difficult to breathe. In the blink of an eye, the lights went out and a strange noise came from behind the factory buildings. This means the aliens are there, so Frank pushes Leona out of the room, and as she runs down the hallway, she can hear Frank scream as the alien kills him. Leona meets the rest of the team in the control room and tells them what happened, causing Ryan to yell at Steven for bringing the alien back with him. The creature entered by blowing a hole in the ship's hull. It also damaged the generator and the cameras didn't work, so they lost contact with Richard and had no pictures of the rest of the ship. Their only solution is to get to the backup generator and reconnect everything, which is extremely difficult to achieve if they can't track the creature, causing Steven to volunteer since it was his fault. With his gun drawn, Steven cautiously walked toward the generator and attempted to bring the communication system back up. The team is now able to track the alien and warn Steven that it is near them, but as soon as Steven tries to leave, he starts hearing these noises. Luckily, Ryan thinks quickly and pulls him back to the control room with a metal rope. The team then comes up with a plan to get the aliens out of the ship. While Steven waits outside to play bait, Leona opens the airlock, followed by the lab door, rushing to hide in another room as the alien comes out. The creature quickly begins to break through the airlocks, but when Richard tries to turn on the engine to ignite it, he cannot because the aliens interfere with the signal. Steven flees and Leona comes to help him, but at that moment the alien appears and Richard regains access to the engine. Steven and Leona run back as the creature is hit by fire, but it's not enough to kill it and it tries to reach Steven, who is pulled inside by David. The alien's tentacles injured David's arm as they closed the door, leaving the creature's limb inside. While the monster returned to the cave, Ryan closed the airlocks and the others had to plug the hole. Moments later, the group finds Frank's body, and while Leona decides to end things out of grief, Steven thinks about Amy. She tried to convince him not to leave by explaining that she was working on a vaccine, but more importantly that she was pregnant, but that was still enough for Steven to stay because saving the Earth was more important than his life. Your personal life. David goes to the lab to bandage his wound and Steven brings tentacles to study. He discovers that the creature is a biological robot made from the same material as the orb, meaning the orb's purpose has always been to create these beasts. Steven informs David that the tentacle has infected him with a bacteria that has a very strong defense mechanism, meaning his blood now holds the key to creating a vaccine to save Earth. As soon as Steven cuts the tentacles, the light goes crazy and he remembers the vision he saw on Earth, meaning the alien is a transponder and this is how his race colonizes planets. Steven decides they need to kill the alien and restore the sphere's settings, but Ryan locks him in the lab and tells him he is under arrest for putting people's lives in danger. Ryan points out that Steven's life is expendable, and David agrees, saying that Steven only wants to play the hero and has never cared about humanity. This reminds Steven of his last argument with Amy, who accused him of having a savior complex before throwing away his bracelet. Steven continues his research at the lab and gets a theory that Richard confirms when he examines the travel log. They didn't jump into space, they jumped in time. They were still on Earth, but 4 billion years ago before life existed, and the clone sphere they brought was the same sphere that paleontologists would find later in the future. Ignoring the fact that David's wound is getting worse, Steven is excited to realize that the piece of bridge he got earlier is the piece he will use in the future to make Amy's bracelet. So he writes a message on it to teach Amy how to activate it, the orb they left behind. Meanwhile, in the present, Amy shows up at Steven's lab while trying to deal with the news that the team failed their mission. Suddenly, Richard brings disturbing news to Steven. Ryan is preparing explosives to detonate the pod and has turned off the radio to avoid complaints. Steven asks Richard to reopen the airlock so he can escape, and as soon as he finds Ryan with the bombs, he begins to explain that they can come up with a better plan than this. Their conversation is interrupted by a sudden gunshot that kills Ryan. The film is about David, who escapes through an airlock and is deranged by an infection, causing him to believe that the aliens chose him to make things right because humans are a dysfunctional people of the sphere. Steven throws Leona's Rubik's Cube against the wall to distract David and shoots it, causing an injured David to run away. Steven then activates the bomb before going outside to shoot off flares to attract the aliens' attention. Steven chases him to the control room and locks him there, but as he runs down the hallway, David opens fire on him and forces him to hide. At this moment, the alien broke through the door and approached Steven, who quickly opened it with a quick swipe. The alien chases Steven as he begins to run away, and when he returns to the control room, he encounters David, who tries to kill him. His actions are stopped by the aliens who appear and kill him first, giving Steven the opportunity to escape the shuttle just before the final bomb explodes and kills the monster. Steven passes out outside for a few seconds and is awakened by Richard trying to contact someone alive. Richard wants to come save him, but the storm is too strong and Steven tells him to stay while he returns to the cave to use the orb. Meanwhile, in the present, Amy finds her bracelet and finally recognizes the message, so she also uses it to activate the orb. In that moment, husband and wife find themselves blending past and present, and Steven quickly shares the vaccine formula before declaring his love just as the connection ends. Steven dies in the cave from lack of oxygen and Amy cries when she realizes she is now a widow. A few months later, Amy is raising a very healthy baby thanks to a vaccine that is now making the Earth a better place. Thank you for watching. See you on the next video.